So, today I want to talk about the first four books of the Odyssey, not the Iliad today, which is very exciting. Um, I am going to talk briefly about the first book. I know you already read it, but there are some moments in there that I think are pretty darn important that I'm afraid we weren't able to talk about. So, real quick. Um, in the first book of the Odyssey, as we know, well, in the first book of any of the books that we're going to be reading, um, just like the Iliad, I think the first 8 to 10, maybe in this case 12 lines, are super important. So I'm just going to read these real quick for you because they are just so important. It begins on page 77, right? Sing to me the man muse, the man of twists and turns, driven time and again off course. Once he had plundered the hallowed heights of Troy. Many cities of men he saw and learned their minds. Many pains he suffered, heart-sick on the open sea, fighting to save his life and bring his comrades home. But he could not save them from disaster, hard as he strove. The recklessness of their own ways destroyed them all, these blind fools. They devoured the cattle of the sun, and the sun god wiped from sight the day of their return. Launch out on his story, muse, daughter of Zeus. Start from where you will. Sing for our time, too. Okay, so those are the first 12 lines, and I think if we look close enough, we're going to find that there are some really important themes going on here, right? A couple of important moments here, I think, are when it talks about bringing the comrades home, okay? I'm going to say Odyssey themes, okay? The reason I have this little bar here, by the way, is because there's a big light um, blob there, so it's kind of in this area. So I'm gonna try and avoid writing there. But in any case, home is a big theme here, right? Home, right? This whole story is about Odysseus trying to get back home. Naturally, there's going to be a big theme of the home here. And in fact, I'm going to write as a little sub one there, family. Okay, family is also very important. Great. And then it says what? After that, there's also moments of recklessness. Okay, so people are going to act recklessly. Okay, maybe it's not a super huge theme, but we're going to see it here and there. And a big theme here is Odysseus. How does Homer define Odysseus? He defines him as the man of twists and turns. Okay, twists and turns is a big theme here too, right? Odysseus, not only in that he is very cunning and wily, but because also he is sent on this huge twisty and turny path back home. Okay, he doesn't return from Troy in a straight line. Okay, it's a big old trek for him. Okay, so I'm going to say these are most of the ones, and then the last one is the line for many cities of men he saw and learned their minds. Okay. Okay, this is really important for a specific moment in Odysseus's escapades. Okay, and I'll tell you about it when we get there. But in one of the small stories about Odysseus, he's going to be tempted to listen to someone, and not for the reason I think we initially will think. Okay, but we'll get there in a moment. Well, not in a moment, but in several books. Okay, so that's kind of the beginning of this. Couple things to set the stage in case you missed it on your first read through. Poseidon is upset with Odysseus for some reason. We don't know what it is yet. He's just upset with Odysseus. And so Athena in Olympus asks Zeus and the other gods whether she can perhaps help Telemachus. Okay, I'm going to write this name down. Telemachus, who is the son of Odysseus, the only son of Odysseus, okay? In fact, the only child of Odysseus and Penelope, all right? Somehow there's apparently a debate that Odysseus had kids with other women. We won't talk about that when we read this. This mythology only focuses on Telemachus, all right? So we're going to only talk about him, really. Um, and one thing to keep in mind is that Athena calls Telemachus a boy. Okay, remember this. You know, of course he's a boy, but this story is about Telemachus becoming a man. Okay, there's going to be a specific moment in the story, and I want you to keep an eye out for it, when Telemachus becomes a man. Okay, it's not going to happen right away. It's going to happen a lot farther down the line. But keep an eye out for boy language, right? Whenever Telemachus is described, he's described as a boy. Okay, won't be forever. Alrighty. Telemachus, meanwhile, Athena does get permission to help Telemachus. And where is Telemachus right now? Well, Telemachus is in his father's palace with his mother, Penelope. I'm going to write that name down too. Okay, she's the queen of Ithaca, right? She is the wife of Odysseus, who is the king of Ithaca, and so, therefore, Penelope is the queen of Ithaca. Telemachus is the prince, okay? In any case, Telemachus is at home, and who else are there are nearly 100, if not 100 or more suitors, okay? Give or take a few. Suitors, okay? A suitor is someone who is trying to flirt and court someone, right? Trying to perhaps even ultimately marry someone. And those suitors are there to marry Penelope, Telemachus's mother, okay? Why are they there doing this? Because they believe after 20 years, okay, 10 years of Odysseus fighting in the War of Troy, 10 more years since his delay, so all the suitors of the island believe that Odysseus is dead, and they want to inherit his estate. Okay, they want to inherit his estate. They want to marry Penelope, who is still beautiful. And so they are living in Odysseus's house, constantly eating all his food and taking all his resources. And Telemachus seems, you know, since he's just a boy, he seems like he can't really do anything about it. Okay, he is not capable of stopping them. And in fact, it seems like it would be wrong for him to stop them from doing this. I say this because the big theme that I neglected to mention at the very beginning of this, another big theme is this xenia thing. Okay, I've mentioned it a few times in class. Xenia, okay, is the virtue of the pagans, and in fact the virtue of, even in Judeo-Christianity, of being a host, of hospitality. Okay, hospitality is this virtue of xenia. I'm going to write that down. Okay, hospitality. And so Telemachus wants to be a good host to these suitors. Now, when Athena visits him, and this happens mostly in book 2, okay? She does visit him in book 1 a little bit, but in book 2 it starts to really burn inside of him. He starts to get angry about the suitors. Athena tells him, look, you should be able to overcome these suitors and in fact overthrow them. You should be able to kick them out of your house, all right? So Athena is suggesting this, is saying, look, you've been a good host. Now is the time for you to, they've overstayed their welcome. They need to get out of here, okay? And so Telemachus starts to really mull over this and says, okay, what do I do? How do I do this? And he calls a council of the older people in his father's palace, okay? And here's the thing, is that the suitors are also present during this council. So they talk about some things that the suitors perhaps shouldn't hear, but that's okay. Telemachus actually gets really upset about the suitors, and he tells the council, and also the suitors who are in the room, that the suitors are parasites. They're taking advantage of him. They're feeding off of him and his mother, and his dead, potentially, father, right? They are horrible, and they are the worst, and he doesn't know what to do about them. So there's a big argument that ensues, right? With the advisors of Odysseus, the older people, are saying, look, you gotta be a strong king and should never, be kind as a king, right? One of these people says this. They say, in fact, Mentor. I'm gonna write that name down. Mentor, which is actually where we get the word mentor from, okay, is a mentor, an advisor to Odysseus and Telemachus. During the arguments, Mentor will say that he says, yeah, the king should not be kind, but actually be cruel and practice outrage. He says this on lines 255 to 260 of Book 2. He literally says that he wants a cruel and outrageous king. Now, is he being a bit hyperbolic? Perhaps, probably, in fact, because Odysseus was a kind king, but Mentor's point is that since Odysseus was such a kind king, look where that got him, right? All the suitors are taking advantage of him, and he's losing everything, okay? It's not working being kind, so you must be, therefore, cruel. Okay, that's Mentor's idea. And we're going to come back to that. That's going to be an important thing to come back to. Telemachus is trying to figure out, okay, should I be kind as a king, right? Because ultimately Telemachus will become king of Ithaca someday, okay? And he says, well, excuse me, he doesn't say anything, but when Mentor gives us advice saying, look, we need a cruel and outrageous king, Telemachus is probably going to log that away and say, okay, well, is that what makes a good king? We'll find out by the end of the story, maybe, whether or not Mentor is correct. Also, meanwhile, the suitors are still there, and Antinous, I'm going to write that name down because he's important too. Antinous is kind of the lead suitor, all right? Antinous is the lead suitor, and he explains to Telemachus, look, it's not our fault your mom hasn't made a decision on one of us yet. In fact, she's tricked us. And he goes into the story of how Penelope, Telemachus' mom, tricked the suitors into thinking that she would make a decision soon, but wouldn't. The idea is that Penelope wanted to make a funeral shroud for, I think, her father-in-law, Odysseus' father, Laertes, for when he would die. Laertes is still alive, but Penelope is saying, look, I want to make this funeral shroud. I still have to mourn my own father-in-law before I marry someone else, okay? It's just, that's how I be. And so every day she would weave it, and then at nighttime she would unravel it a lot, in fact, so that she'd constantly be working on this thing, and it tricked the suitors for about 3 years, okay? Until just recently, one of the maids of Penelope kind of let slip that she's been doing this unraveling, and so the suitors caught her red-handed, and now they're getting closer to the wedding date. She is going to choose a suitor soon, if Odysseus doesn't come back very soon, right? So that's what's kind of going on. That's going on underneath this. And Telemachus, of course, does not want this to happen because he believes that Odysseus is still alive, okay? And it would be wrong for his mother to marry some random suitor. Now, that doesn't mean that Telemachus is suggesting that Penelope is evil or anything. He's trying to protect her from that mistake, okay? So, towards the end of all this arguing, all right, Athena comes in and talks to Telemachus, disguised as someone, and Athena convinces Telemachus to go find out about his father by going to Pylos and Sparta. In Pylos, we're going to see, Pylos, we're going to see our friend Nestor. You remember Nestor? He's the old guy of the Iliad, right? He's the father of Antilochus. He's the guy that gave Antilochus advice for racing against Menelaus. He's the guy that Agamemnon said, look, if we had 12 of you, we would have torn down Troy in like a day. Okay, Nestor, wise guy, old guy too. And then Telemachus also needs to go to Sparta. We've all heard of Sparta. And the king of Sparta is Menelaus, okay? Telemachus is going to meet Menelaus and his queen, Helen. Yes. Helen is with Menelaus again. All right, this is something we'll talk about soon. We'll talk about this in book 4. What that tension is like, and hopefully when we come back in person eventually, we'll talk more about the relationship between Helen and Menelaus. It's very interesting. Okay. So I'm trying to think what else happens there. Yeah. So that's kind of the idea. Telemachus does tell the suitors, look, I'm going to go and get my dad. So good luck trying to stop me. And the suitors are saying, well, okay, I guess he's going to be all high and mighty now. But they don't really believe him. The suitors don't believe Telemachus is going to try and find his father and tell kings Nestor and Menelaus about the situation at home. But Telemachus does leave, and he doesn't tell his mother, okay, because otherwise Penelope's going to try and stop him, and that's not good. So Telemachus is out of there. That's book 2. That's the second book of the Odyssey. Just so you know, what I'm doing here is I'm kind of making a summarization of books 1 through 4, so you don't have to read them, okay? 1 you already read, and I did want you to read it because it is so important. But 2 through 4, I'm just going to summarize so that we can start with discussing book 5 on Monday. But in any case, let's talk about book 3 really quick. Alrighty? Book 3 opens, and let me erase this. Book 3 opens with Nestor and Telemachus landing on sandy Pylos, okay? And Nestor is such a good example of this xenia virtue, okay? Nestor starts off not by asking Telemachus all these questions and saying, who are you, what are you doing here? He doesn't even know who Telemachus is. And he starts by feeding him and laying out these beautiful rugs and carpets for him, like right on the beaches. So Telemachus has to go he doesn't have to go far at all before Nestor is showing him this great hospitality. Okay, he feeds him, he is happy and wined and dined. And then Nestor asks him, who are you? What are you doing here? What do you need from me? Okay, in which Telemachus then responds with saying that he's here to ask about his father, Odysseus, okay? Mainly, is he dead? All right. And then Nestor gives this whole spiel, story of the returns, the nostoi, if you will, right? This is where the nostoi begins to come in. If you'll recall, the nostoi was one of the stories, the epics, okay, between the Iliad and the Odyssey, alrighty? Homer then incorporates the nostoi into the Odyssey right here, okay? He says, look, Agamemnon and Menelaus were very argumentative, right, upon leaving Troy. Okay, Menelaus wanted to go home right away. Agamemnon wanted to appease the wrath of Athena, the goddess Athena, because she was angry that they stole her palladium. Okay, remember that? So, what do? The Achaeans are kind of split. In fact, both options were not the right option, okay, as we'll see. Menelaus tries to go home right away, but he wanders for about 8 years before he gets back to Sparta. And we'll talk more about that in book 4. And then Agamemnon, he tries to go home and he gets killed by his wife. We'll talk more about that in the Orestea. And Odysseus went with Agamemnon, not to get to Agamemnon's home or anything, but Odysseus left with the group that wanted to stay and offer up gifts to Athena, alrighty? Didn't work, okay? They were all, as it turns out, supposed to offer up gifts to Zeus, not to Athena, so that close, but not quite good enough. Odysseus leaves with a group that tried to stay back and offer up gifts, and he's nowhere to be found. Nestor has no idea where this guy is, okay? So, unfortunate. For Telemachus, he doesn't really get to learn much more about Odysseus. At least he learns that he went with Agamemnon back. Nestor, in the meantime, is dropping very not-so-subtle hints about Agamemnon, who was killed by his wife, right? Well, Agamemnon had a son, Orestes. We'll hear all about that story next semester. And Agamemnon will say, look, this guy's son was a great son. He was able to do great things. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, Telemachus, you are the son of a great man. Will you do great things? I hope you will, right? Says Nestor, alrighty. And so, after all that, he tells Telemachus one thing he needs to keep in mind is that if there's a moral to this story, it's to go straight back home once the deed is done, okay, like Menelaus, okay? Even though he wandered about 8 years, he at least didn't get killed by his wife, all right? So, Athena then tells Telemachus, you should heed these words of advice from Nestor and get going. And so Telemachus tries to go, but Nestor says, no, let me keep being a host. Okay? And in fact, Nestor, upon Telemachus' departure, he sends his own son, Pisistratus. That's a weird name. He sends his son Pisistratus with Telemachus to be his aide and his friend, alrighty? And they actually end up becoming great friends by the end of Telemachus' quest, alrighty? That's book 3 of the Odyssey. And now let's move into book 4. So Telemachus goes to Menelaus' palace, already in Sparta, along with Pisistratus. And it is amazing. It is so elegant and rich and beautiful, so much so that Telemachus tells Pisistratus that this palace of Menelaus must be as great as the halls of Zeus in Olympus. Menelaus overhears this, and he says, no, okay? Because otherwise, if the gods hear me trying to make myself like them, it's a bad time for me, all right? No, I am nowhere near the gods. Yes, I am the most amazing person on earth, but I'm nothing like the gods. So he's, humble, but not that humble, right? He's still got his great spiritedness, which was a virtue for the Greeks, okay? And in fact, Menelaus explains how he got all these riches, okay? It was actually during his wanderings, he went to Egypt and Ethiopia and all these different exotic places. And actually, what's really interesting is the Greeks at the time, they held that Egypt was a land of ancient wisdom. Not unlike how we view the Greeks, okay? We view the Greeks as these ancient, wise philosophers that kind of made the world and society what it is. Well, the Greeks believed that of the Egyptians, okay? So when Menelaus comes back from Egypt, he's very, very rich, okay? And he's got wealth beyond compare, okay? And wisdom perhaps even beyond compare, alrighty? So that's a big deal that he went to Egypt. And yet here's the thing. Menelaus is talking to Telemachus and says, look, I have all these riches, okay? I am the wealthiest amongst the world. And yet I'm not happy, right? He has his wife back, yes. But things are a little tense between them, right? Helen hasn't really forgiven herself for what she did wrong. And so there's this weird tension. It's very awkward between Helen and Menelaus. All of Menelaus' friends are dead. Not all of them, but a lot of them. His brother, Agamemnon, is dead. Odysseus is either dead or missing. A greater Ajax is dead. Achilles is dead. Patroclus is dead. Antilochus is dead. There's just so many big, important people, or rather, great friends of Menelaus that have died. And he would give all the wealth that he has back just to have them, okay? So, it's very sad moment. So they have dinner. Telemachus, Menelaus, Helen, okay? And Helen tells Telemachus about how Odysseus actually infiltrated Troy. And I'll see if I can find it. It's in book 4, verse 270 is where it starts. So if you want to read it yourself, you're free to. Because it's a pretty interesting and important moment, right? The idea is that he kind of scarred himself, looked like a beggar, and she questioned him and in fact bathed him and gave him clothes to wear, and she had to swear a binding oath not to reveal him as Odysseus to the Trojans, not till he was back at the swift ships. Okay, and yeah, this is the moment where she says, "Look, I'm gonna try and get back to my husband Menelaus from the Trojans now that I see Odysseus is here." Right? Yeah. In any case, great moment between pages 132 and 133 of the Odyssey, book 4. All right. In any case, let's keep going. Telemachus then, after the whole story, asks Menelaus about his father. Says, "Look, do you know anything about where my dad may be?" And Menelaus says, "Oh, I have some info. Because here's what happened during my wanderings. I met some nymph, okay, and she is the daughter of the old man of the sea, okay? The old man of the sea, okay? Quite a strange name for a god, but yes, he Menelaus needs to find out where Odysseus is, okay, and why one, Menelaus is not getting back as quickly as he'd like to, and two, why Odysseus is not getting back as quickly as he'd like to. And so Menelaus asks the old man, or is going to try and ask the old man of the sea, look, how do I get back? What did I do wrong? Okay. And in order to ask him these questions, he needs to wrestle with the old man of the sea. Okay. And this nymph gives Menelaus the hints or the ways to wrestle him. It's very Jacob, I want to say, in the angel, right, where he dreams about the angel and he wrestles the angel, right? Same thing kind of happens here with Menelaus and the old man of the sea. And so he does wrestle with him. The old man of the sea turns into a bunch of different things, right? And Menelaus somehow is able to wrestle him still. And so the old man of the sea says, okay, fine, what do you need? And Menelaus says, why can't I get back home? Old man of the sea tells him, look, you needed to offer Zeus offerings instead of Athena, or going without offering offerings, okay? That's why they're so upset with you. That's why you're not getting back in time. Also, a friend of yours is trapped somewhere. That friend of yours being Odysseus, and he's trapped on the island of Calypso, okay? Don't know who that is. We haven't heard of Calypso yet, but we will by the end of the story, okay? And so that's where he is right now, according to Menelaus. Okay, and Telemachus says, thank you. I have some information now. I know what I can do, or at least I know where he is, if he's still alive, okay? Now I should be going, okay? In the meantime, back home in Ithaca, the suitors realize that Telemachus has left, and they are starting to notice that, okay, if he's left, he's telling Menelaus and Nestor about us, okay, if he's actually doing what he said he's going to do. And we're not going to be able to do what we want anymore. We're not going to be able to mooch off of Odysseus. So we need to kill Telemachus, okay? And in fact, Antinous, remember that guy Antinous? Antinous decides that he and a crew of about 20 men are going to sail after Telemachus and kill him, okay? Penelope hears this and berates them. She gets angry and yells at them, okay? And they say, whatever, we don't care. We're going to go chase Telemachus and try and kill him. That's where book 4 ends, okay? So that's where I'm going to leave off on these summarizations. For homework over the weekend, I want you to, well, and Friday, I want you to read book 5, okay? The entirety of book 5. Shouldn't be too long, if I recall. Let me double check. Yeah, book 4 was a longer one. Most of these books are a lot shorter than the books in the Iliad, thank goodness. But yeah, book 5 is a little longer. That's why you have a whole weekend to read it, okay? It's about 540 to 550 verses, okay? It starts on page... Let's see. Starts on page 152 and goes till 167. It's about 15 pages, but again, over 3 days, it's 5 pages a day, you can do it. And then we'll talk about that on Monday. Check Jupyter and Google Classrooms for a bunch of questions that I will be asking you to answer based on things or events in book 5, alrighty? Yeah, that's all I can think of. Book 1 questions will be due on whenever we get back as well. Monday if we don't come back. Hopefully we do, but they will be due on Monday, okay?